welcome to Summer of Sega Episode 3, and today I'm going to be talking about the Sega Saturn. The Saturn is the Sega system I originally had the least experience with. Sega really botched the launch of the system in '95 here in the US, and many stores, especially around me like KB Toys, didn't carry it at all, or they carried it for such a short period of time that if you didn't get it within that window of roughly the first year to year and a half, you probably weren't going to get a Sega Saturn when it was officially on the market originally in the 90s. And for me, I think I saw one in person one time at a store, and I had one friend who I knew actually had a Saturn in middle school at the time. That was it. Aside from that, I barely knew the Saturn existed. In general, Sega has very little presence in the area where I'm at. Even at retro stores, their selection of games is incredibly tiny for a lot of Sega stuff. It's a big Nintendo area, it's a big Xbox area, it's a big PlayStation area, even though PS1 and PS2 is not really a non-big PlayStation area, it's worldwide. But in general, Sega has not done well where I live, and even worse, the Sega Saturn is practically non-existent where I live. So it's a system where I had the original PlayStation and I was really enjoying it, and I eventually got an N64, and I really didn't know much about the Sega Saturn until it was already the next generation and I got a Dreamcast. So the Saturn was a system that I never really went back to. I've always been kind of interested in it. I've always been sort of searching for, these games look really, really cool, but I never got into it at all simply because I had so many other systems and so many other games that it wasn't really worth it in my mind for a while to try and go back and hunt down. But thankfully, once I really started to get into Sega and I started playing my Genesis a lot, and I was playing other Sega stuff and the Dreamcast, I really got more and more into learning about the Sega Saturn and finding out that its reputation here in the US, particularly in the area where I live, is really not well earned. It's not deserving of this beautiful, beautiful system. It's something where it didn't get a lot of support in the US, but still has a lot of really good exclusives that if you look into the library, it's worth owning just for the North American library alone. But then you realize that the Sega Saturn was actually a really decent competitor against the original PlayStation in Japan, where the N64 didn't do very well. And the Japanese Sega Saturn library is massive. It's over 5, I think almost 6 times the size of the North American library. It got a ton of support, a lot of really, really good games, tons and tons of exclusives, and on top of that, many times when there would be a Saturn port of a game and a PlayStation port, the Saturn game was typically better just natively. And then on top of that, in the back of the Saturn, you had the extra RAM port back here, and a lot of games, particularly 2D fighting games, would support that extra RAM, which would give you extra frames of animation, higher frame rates, all kinds of stuff with a lot of games. And then even better, there's an expansion port in the back where you would have not only internal memory, through basically a little battery watch, instead of having to have a memory card. You could have that little internal memory, or you could have in the RAM boosters also have memory cards. Some of them are both a RAM booster and a memory card in the back, so it was already sort of built in. And you could also get an MPEG card or a video CD card that would allow you to play video CD movies on the Sega Saturn. Plus, some games actually took advantage of that card, where it would already look good on the Saturn when you put it in. But then if the game detects a video CD card in the system, it will use that and sort of up-res the image. Certain games like Lunar and Lunar 2, there's a VCD supported version of those in Japan for the Saturn only that look beautiful. They look better than any other port of Lunar 1 and 2. There's a bunch of other games that use it. There's a lot of the Japanese Saturn library really, really fascinated me at first because of the really cool text adventure, digital comic, and like FMV games. Over here, FMV games have a really bad name, and rightfully so. And in Japan, there are some bad ones as well. But also in Japan, particularly on something like the Saturn, there are a lot of really, really high quality ones. Something like Tokyo Shadow or Machi. Machi is one of the top rated games of all time in Japan, and it's an FMV game. That says something about the quality difference between the majority of ones that we got versus what they got. So the Saturn library really, really, really excited me, and I was so happy this past Christmas when I finally got a Sega Saturn. And I got this one over here with the, there are two models in North America. Japan got a bunch of models. So we got two here with the round buttons, as you can see on the bottom. And then eventually I was able to get the other model that we got with the oval buttons on the bottom there, so I have both there. And I've just fell in love with the system. It's such a sturdy system. It's incredibly hardy. It's very silent, especially for a disc-based system. You can often sort of hear the drive, especially when it's loading something, and the Saturn is almost completely silent. The thing is just built to last. It feels hardy, but it doesn't feel like an original Xbox, which is just sort of this hulking thing. The Saturn doesn't feel like it's burdensome by its size or its weight. It just feels sturdy and well built. I love the design of it. I love everything about it. The look, there's something just that really clicked with me for it. I really like the controller. I really like the Saturn 3D controller. Both of these made it onto my top 5 controllers of all time. I'm really enjoying the Saturn. As you can see, I really like the Saturn. I don't know, there's something about it that there's a sort of almost unidentifiable quality with the Saturn and with one other system that I'll be mentioning that I really just am very passionate about everything about them, not just the library of games, which is of course fantastic, but something about the hardware really clicks for me in a certain way that it's beyond just sort of enjoying it. Like this, like I want to like hug it. I love this Saturn more than I ever thought. It's something I knew I was going to like, but liking is not a strong enough word for the Saturn. The Saturn is fantastic. I was so happy to get it this past Christmas, and I was lucky enough that I was smart enough to, like before I got my Saturn, I was able to, right before Christmas, pick up an Action Replay card, which is a must for the Saturn. It's one of the easiest systems, if not the easiest system ever, to import games for as far as systems that are region locked. The Action Replay card acts as a huge mega memory card for the system, plus a RAM card, plus it makes the system region free. So I've been playing North American and Japanese games, and it's nice to be able to just sort of take one game out and just put the next game in and hit start. You don't have to do anything special to just switch regions automatically. And that Christmas I got that, and I was able to pick up Battle Arena Toshinden Remix, which was very fitting because its main competitor, the PlayStation, the first game I ever got for it was the original copy of Battle Arena Toshinden. So getting the remix was just a very fitting Christmas gift. It was a perfect start to my Saturn library, and now just 5 months later I have 14 games for the system, 9 US releases and 5 Japanese releases, so I've been getting a lot into Japanese stuff. It's really shown me a lot of great franchises that continued on the Saturn that I really didn't know that much about, besides that I would kind of like them. And out of those 14 games, I mean, 6 of them have made it onto my list of like favorite games of all time. Panzer Dragoon 2 is just blowing my mind, and Nights into Dreams is my favorite platformer ever. I mean, there's so much that I love about it. I have a bunch of demo discs, and I want majority of games on those discs. There's something about it that is just fascinating. It's something that my wife really likes as well, because it's sort of, in a way, the Saturn is kind of like a super mega Genesis, because it was originally built to be the ultimate 2D system. And the reason it has the cartridge slot in the back is that the original idea was for it to be able to play Sega Genesis games, and that was sort of put to the wayside after Sega of North America really pushed for that, and Sega of Europe I think pushed for it as well. But Sega Japan didn't really want that because Genesis didn't do well in Japan, and instead we got the much better idea of the RAM pack in the back. It's just an amazing system. I can't wait to talk about it a lot. I mean, it's probably going to be one of, if not the most talked about system this summer, just because I've really been enjoying it so much. Everything about it, from hardware to software, is just beautiful. I mean, look at this design of this console. Something about it, to me, is just, this is a sexy beast right here. This is just a beautiful system. Everything about it is just perfection in design. Absolutely love everything about it. Amazing games. I can't wait to do a bunch of reviews for Sega Saturn games. Again, this is the one I've probably been importing the most for, just because of the very unique library. Like I said, the Japanese library is vastly superior to the North American library, even though we got some really good games. And it's a great system to be able to bring that stuff in and be able to explore games I would never be able to play before. So that is the Sega Saturn, pretty much my personal experience with it so far. It's really fresh as far as Sega goes. It's my most recent acquisition, and it's something where you're going to see the most sort of live reactions from me experiencing things for the first time, because it's such a new thing for me, and it's just new and exciting, and I absolutely love this thing. The Sega Saturn is great, and I really hope you like seeing all these Sega Saturn videos, and I really hope you're interested in learning about a system that, particularly in North America, a lot of people know very little about. It did very, very poorly, and I hope I kind of get you interested through my interest in the Sega Saturn. So please check out this next video, my very first review of a Sega Saturn game, Nights into Dreams, and there'll be plenty more Sega Saturn stuff to come. And be sure to join me next week as I talk about the console that finally surpassed the PlayStation 2 as my favorite system of all time.